Good evening, everyone. This is the Sketch to Stretch presentation created and narrated by me, Lauren Walls, for your viewing and academic pleasures. So let's dig in. Very quickly, a quick disclaimer. Remember, I'm a kindergarten teacher and learn best by visual representation, so keep that in mind as we go through this presentation. Sketch to Stretch is a comprehension strategy used by third graders and beyond. Sketch to Stretch is defined as a visual activity that moves students beyond literal comprehension of a story they're reading to think more deeply about the characters, theme, and other elements of the story structure and the author's craft. I would say that sketch to stretch is the underlying symbolism within a text. More specifically, students are focusing on the meaning of the story, not on one favorite part. Students should focus on the main idea of the story and what the story was trying to convey. Just as you see at the bottom, students are going to read between the lines of the story, not what is right in front of them. So you might be thinking to yourself in your head, dude, wait, what? Just as this husky's thinking at the top of our page. How in the world are we going to implement this into our classrooms? Well, let me show you. Students can work individually or in small groups. Students can use pictures or diagrams to represent what the story means to them. In their diagrams, they can use lines, shapes, colors, symbols, and words to express their interpretations and feelings about the story. Well, you might be saying also to yourself, well, why wouldn't you just talk about it, discuss it together? Well, according to Phyllis Witten, using sketch to stretch strategies provides multiple individual interpretations of the same text. More importantly, she discusses that the sketch to stretch provides an on-paper interpretation. She goes on to say, students invent means to express their thinking about the story's ideas. The sketches are metaphorical by nature, so it is impossible to have literal retellings. I find this strategy effective in encouraging a diversity of perspectives about a story, and in using it, many potential at-risk readers, as well as stronger students, become valued literary interpreters. This makes me think of the differences between kindergarten, first, second graders, and third, fourth, and beyond. Kindergarten, first, and second really focus on the literal idea of a story, retelling the sequence, telling the characters and the setting, and all the details. However, in third grade, as we stated before, we are going to read in between the lines and think about the metaphorical idea behind the story, or what the story is trying to teach us. So here are the steps that we would follow if we were to implement this sketch to stretch in our classrooms. Step 1, read and respond to the story. Well, of course, you're going to read a novel or parts of a novel, chapter, book, or chapters within the book, a short story or a poem, and discuss it as a group. Which brings us to step number 2. As a group, you're going to discuss the theme. You're going to talk together about the symbolic representation that would fit the text using different visuals, such as colors, shapes, lines, or symbols that might represent an idea or theme from the text. Here are some ideas below, discussing some things that you might symbolically represent when reading a story. Some stories convey happiness, sadness, or fear. To give a couple of examples, happiness might be given the color pink because pink makes a lot of people happy, along with the sun and flowers. To represent someone that is happy, you might show them with their arms up and lines that are happy and bouncing. Sadness might be represented with a teardrop. It also might be represented as a person with their body that is very closed and their head that is down. Also showing lines that are lonely and alone. Lastly, there are fear in some themes in stories. And here are some ideas that might represent fear. Eyes being wide open, your hands being in front of your face. Lines that are around the turtle showing that not only is he scared or fearful, but he is so scared and fearful that he is actually shaking. So the third step is, after you have talked in a whole group together and getting their mind rolling about what types of symbols we are going to use to show the theme of the story, the students are actually going to get into small groups and draw and sketch to reflect about what the story means to them. However, as teachers, I believe that we need to help students understand that there are no single or correct interpretation of the theme in the story. Students at this point will start to stretch their knowledge of the text by discussing cause and effect relationships, inferencing, drawing conclusions, constructing generalizations or summarizing skills, reflecting the main idea of the story, and identifying the theme, just to name a few. Also, if you run into the problem of students feeling as though that their sketches or drawings are not as they want, students can include a brief written explanation of why they drew what they did to explain or back the reasoning behind their sketch. Step 4, after they draw their sketches as a small group, they are going to take that sketch and share that sketch to the whole group or other small groups. This is a very important part. The sketches are explained and discussion happens of why they use the symbols they chose. This makes others in the class stretch their thinking about differences between feelings of the text they read. Different articles said different things about the steps, and some articles hinted at a fifth step, so I'd like to include that. Step 5, revise and add details from the discussion. This helps students stretch their thinking even more to add details from their discussion. Also, students are to post their sketch to stretch for better comprehension of the text at a later date. There are multiple variations of sketch to stretch. Some teachers save the sketch to stretch drawings, and they can be used for pre-reading predictions and or an anticipatory set for that text the next year. In addition, sketch to stretch can be used throughout the year. This should be used to guide students to dig deeper into the meaning of text through symbols, to allow them to come close to the characters and the plot by reading, sharing, and reflecting, to jump right into the book and not simply look at it from the outside pages. There was multiple ideas about sketch to stretch, so I'd like to talk about the differing opinions. Some say that students need many opportunities to experiment with this activity before they move beyond drawing pictures of the story events and characters and are able to think symbolically. I agree. However, I believe that if you give them the right tools, they will be successful, and I think that's what others are saying also. Brainstorming together and giving ideas for students to work with, along with boundaries and rules to abide by, is a part of their exploration and experimentation of the sketch to stretch outline. Therefore, I feel, why can't we just get along? I say, students have to know that there is always more than one way to show an idea in a story, and more than one way or symbol to show the same thing. Children have to exercise their imaginary muscles to think beyond what is right in front of them and use symbols to stand for those meanings. I believe that this is very powerful. Right now I'd like to discuss how I feel about sketch to stretch being used in kindergarten, first, and second grade. In all of the readings that I found, it does indicate that they believe it needs to stick to third grade and higher. However, I believe that kindergartners learn through text, and if they were not digging deeper within that text and understanding the theme and the meaning, they wouldn't learn from those stories, such as stories about manners and how we treat people, stories about silly characters and different audiences. I believe that students learn through story. And if we are not showing them starting in kindergarten that stories are written to be symbols for other ideas, I feel as though we are not giving them what they truly need to succeed and getting them ready for third grade. However, I digress. But I'd really like to try the sketch to stretch as a whole group towards the end of the year to see if the students can start to become familiar with reading between the lines. To conclude this sketch to stretch presentation, I'd like to share one more visual representation of how we are supposed to use the strategy of sketch to stretch. First, we read a selection. Second, we discuss symbolic representations of the theme or main idea in the story. Third, we break into groups and we start to draw or to sketch. We start to sketch those ideas onto paper. Then, in that group, we begin to stretch our mind and our ideas about the theme and the feelings in which it gives us in the story. We use the sketch and our stretching of the minds to share in our fourth step with the whole group in discussing why we chose the symbols we chose. So as you can see here, we sketch, then we stretch our minds, and this gives us an opportunity to dig deeper in the text, which is summed up very nicely in this quote. One's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimension. Students will take others' ideas and build upon those ideas to strengthen their comprehension and understanding of the story. And therefore, sketch to stretch is an effective strategy to use in your classroom for comprehension. Thank you very much.